So I am happy to introduce our Something presenters today, Sarah, Tavis, and Anne Marcken. They are founders of the Third Thing Press, and Sarah, as some of you know, is SPSCC faculty and advisor of the student publication, The Percival Review, as well as a writer, and Anne is a freelance writer and interdisciplinary artist. Is that the right word? And I'm going to turn it over to them.
Great. Thanks, Nicole. Thanks for having us. It's exciting to do this with our community. I love it. And also it's nice as SPSCC faculty to participate and as an artist. So that's fun to do something besides teaching.
Yeah, we're really excited to be able to represent faculty too. So thanks.
Yeah. So we're gonna start with a conversation between Anne and I just about the press a little bit and our thinking about the press. But for those of you who maybe don't know, I'm not sure. I mean, I know you do, Kelsey, but other folks might not know much about the press. Anne will type in our website in the chat box. So if you want to go check us out through our website, that has information about our values and our mission and really what's driving us as a press, as well as our cohorts. So you can check out who we are publishing, whose work we're putting into the world. We're also on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram at the Third Thing Press. So yeah.
So hi, Mariella and Kelsey and Terry. It's nice to be with people who, and Nicole, are in the same community, but who I have not glimpsed for months now.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and the dogs.
Something's happening outside the window. Sorry.
Terry says in the chat, hello, friends.
Hello,
friends. Yay. So Sarah, do you want to say a couple words about the press and what it is, or just shall we let people look at that on the website? Who's your new friend? I guess I would just add to the brief overview that we've published. We recently released 4 titles, and we're in the process of editing the next 4 books that will come out in 2021. So
and that's how we publish in a cohort, so that they are in each other's good company, all of the writers and artists. Yeah, and actually, you know, our mission is, we talk about creating necessary alternatives, and really that's about wanting to put work in the world that is often not listened to. So hearing the voices of folks who tend to be marginalized, and so using our platform to lift up those voices and to put them into the world. So that is really the main focus of our press and the people we choose to publish. Really, our bottom line is it a necessary alternative? So.
Right. Yeah. So we publish interdisciplinary, intersectional work primarily by people of color, Indigenous people, queer people, women, which we tend to spell WOMXN. So there's a very expansive sense of what that might mean to any individual author or in any particular work. And we're happy to answer questions about the press and about our work there. At the end of this, we'll leave a little bit of time for that. So if you think of things that you want to ask or that pop into your head about what it means to be running an independent press at all, what it means to be running one in Olympia, what our work is, what the projects are, we're more than happy to we'll leave time and are more than happy to answer those at the end. But we're really excited to have a conversation. It strikes me, Sarah, when you say the thing about the cohort, which is a primary, I guess, a central sort of organizing principle at the press, that it's about conversations, the conversations that books have with each other, that writers and artists have with each other, and that writers and artists have with their readers, with the community. That cohort really starts at the press, at home, in the relationships that are formed over the year or more that the works are in development and in the editorial process. And as they come out into the world, that starts to seem even more potent and meaningful, I think, for what we've seen anyway this year as the books have come out.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's a little bit, especially when you were mentioned that feels like what we do here. We're having a little mini cohort, a little conversation today about and with writers and what they're saying through their books, and then how those books are in communication with each other when you start putting those lines next to each other and having different people speak them who bring their own meaning to them.
Yeah, that was our whole goal today, was to use the values that we hold as a press and put them into work in this space that Nicole's provided, so that we can all listen and enter into a conversation. So doing what the third thing does here with y'all.
And also in the vein of conversation, when Sarah and I were trying to figure out how to talk about the press and talk about ourselves in relationship to the press, we thought it would be way easier to answer questions, to ask each other questions, than to try to just come up with the thing that we had to say. So I'm going to ask Sarah a question about herself and the press, and she's going to ask me one about me and the press. I might not remember the question that I had in mind perfectly because of the things you've said, but essentially what I'm curious about is what matters to you most, Sarah, with your work at the Third Thing Press and what we do here. What's the thing that motivates you?
I think that, there's a lot there. I was thinking about this earlier, and really what I mentioned before is having the opportunity to be a part of a platform that so that I can use what I have available to me to put other voices into the world that need to be heard. I think that particularly, I've been thinking about this a lot lately, particularly not only because I'm white, but also because I'm a teacher. I feel like a lot of time my voice is heard a lot. And especially teaching online, I feel like my voice is heard a lot. And so it's really great to have an opportunity to actually step back and to be a part of putting other voices that really need to be heard. And also, like, I really love getting to help develop our values. So thinking about, what does it really mean to be vulnerable? And what does it mean to be vulnerable in the work of the press and with the cohort and with one another in the creating the organization or the work that we're choosing to do. And so I'm constantly stepping into like that feeling of discomfort and trust. And that to me feels essential to all of the work that we need to do right now culturally. And so one thing that feels really important is that actually one of the lines that I pulled, I probably won't read it, so I'm just going to read it right now. There's a book from an activist and writer. Her name is Adrienne Marie Brown, and the book is called Emergent Strategy, and it's a book for organizers and activists. But yes, there it is. Yes, this has been a book that I've been looking at for a while. So one of the questions she asks is, how do we, who know the world needs to change, begin to practice being different? How do we have to be for justice to be truly transformative? And that feels like that's what my commitment to the press is that it feels like the work that we're doing is we're trying to not just like, here's work that needs to be heard in the world, people pay attention to these voices, but it also feels like, how do we as an organization really move from those values? And it is not easy always. It's a challenge, but it's so worth it. And the level of trust that I have with Anne and other folks who are part of this press, it just keeps growing because we keep showing up to do that work. So that feels to me like a microcosm of what I'm hoping to be thinking about and doing on a larger scale.
That's great.
Yeah.
It's inspiring to hear you talk about it.
Yeah, it actually, isn't it? I love how, like, when you start reading and putting ideas together, and then you all of a sudden, oh, that thing. So the question that I have for Anne is really about the work of the press. So I feel like I was talking more towards the vision of the press. Not that it isn't the work, but I want to hear more about like what is your approach as an editor? What is your approach as a publisher? I'm curious to hear about what that, like, your thoughts on that.
Me too. What will come out? I have so many thoughts on that, right? But it's true what you say, that the vision of the press and holding the vision and enacting the values and sort of interrogating the values and checking them in relationship to real world so that they don't become sort of fixed. That is the work of the press, truly. And those values are, as any way we've articulated them so far, is vulnerability, accountability, and radical imagination are really these things that guide us in our work approach to finding work, responding to work, working with one another, all at all the different levels. And so I do think that those inform my work as an editor and as a publisher. I'm not sure about the boundaries between those roles. Sometimes it feels like the publisher part of me just does all the labor so that the editor can have all the fun. But it's not really true, because it all is actually pretty wonderful at some level. But editing is, I guess I'll speak to more. So when we find a project, however it comes to us, whether somebody points it out to us, or we trip over it, or we go search it out, this feeling of it being a necessary alternative, which we realize is really our guiding editorial principle for whether or not to take up a project. Is it doing something essential? Is it doing something truly necessary? And also, is it an alternative? Has it been done? However necessary it is it doing it differently than it's been done? Is this work being done in the same way by someone else already? Or is this truly different? Whether that is the form, the content, the approach, the process, the perspective, however, all different ways, because we publish all different kinds of books. So once, I think then it's about, for me, I know a project but by that, and know that I can work with it by that, in part because of whether or not I form questions when I'm writing. When I start to engage with the text in question form in the margin, like I sort of say, oh, I sort of lean in toward it, or it suggests something that is not fully formed yet for me, or that it creates a little opening that feels available to me, then I think I can go there as an editor. And then it's a process of really learning the world and the process of the writer of the book. So it's like a total abandonment of my own aesthetic sensibilities and my own ideas about, because I'm a writer and an artist, and sort of letting go of all of those judgments that I bring to my own work, judgments meaning matters of discernment, and retaining all of my creative and critical faculties in service of the work that I'm in. So it's a long process generally. It's a lot of reading and rereading and conversation and discovering the structure of that process that works for that artist, whether it's a 4-hour meeting every 2 weeks, or it's a constant text conversation, or it's 2 months go by and then they drop another draft on me, or whatever the shape of those interactions is. It's very dependent on what serves the work and serves the creator of that work.
I really love that, Anne. Thanks for sharing that, especially because I think it really speaks to this idea of perspective, of having to step outside of our own perspective and really enter into somebody else's perspective. So I appreciate that articulation.
Yeah, I think it's really especially important. Well, I want to say this actually before we step into the next part of our conversation, where we share the lines that we've brought, hopefully, or I know that I have a big stack of books here, I think, if people didn't bring their own. It feels really important to acknowledge that this sense of taking somebody's work up, so I'm often editing the work of people of color, people whose personal experiences I may or may not have shared. And it's really important to be mindful all the time of the potential for exploitation, the power differential there, and cultivating and actively cultivating and engendering a redistribution of that power and a crediting of the artist, whether I'm editing their work or just reading their work, and examining the space that exists between me and their writing and the thing that arises there that may not be in that work or may not be possible for me to apprehend in that work. So I am very interested in that ambiguity, that space between the creator and what they create and the reader, and I think that there's incredibly exciting potential there for change, for community building, for culture creation.
Yeah, it occurs to me that thinking about my role as faculty, that's a lot of what happens when teaching feels like I'm really engaged. It's very similar. So yeah.
Thanks everybody for indulging us in that
yeah.
conversation.
Anything else you want to add, Anne, before I introduce what our experiment for the day is?
Let's do it.
Okay. So like I said earlier, Anne and I talked about wanting to do something that embodies the values of the third thing. And we had this idea back, well, you had this idea, was it back in January maybe? We were thinking about an event for that we were doing with Desuetude, the gallery downtown. And we had this idea of a word potluck. And we thought this would be a great time to do the word potluck. And the goal of it really is to make space to listen and consider voices of POC artists and writers that we feel like, that we brought forward, that we feel like speaks to this moment. Yeah, I love that idea, Kelsey, to do it for the library. I mean, we'll see, we're experimenting here. So this may be awkward, and we go through our reading once, we go through it a second time. We're just gonna be really fluid and see what happens. It'll be fun. So this is what we had envisioned, is that we'll read a line. If you feel called to read a line, unmute, read your line. If you brought a line and you don't feel comfortable reading it, if you type it into the chat box, one of us, Nicole or Anne or I, are happy to read it if you're more comfortable sharing it that way. And then also, of course, you can listen. And that's the goal of this time that we have together, is to listen and consider the work that's being presented. Yeah, did I miss anything? I think that's the thrust of what we'd like to do. And we brought extra lines too, so we can, I know I actually did this because my eyes are so weird that through the books I don't think I can read.
I've got the zillions of post-it. Yeah.
And then after, what we thought is that after we are done with the word potluck part of this time together, that we'd open up opportunity just for a conversation about the experience. That seems important, an important part of it. So, all right.
Do you have something you want to kick us off with, Sarah?
Yeah.
Or does somebody else? Are they just like?
Yeah. Anybody else feel called to go first? I'm happy to.
I have one, but I'm not sure if I understood it correctly, so it might be too long.
Well, go for it.
Yeah.
Okay. It's from one of my grandfather's books. This is called "Come Walk Among the Stars," and my grandfather had his own publishing house called Inspiration House. He's, old Protestant, so they lean towards spirituality, but I tried to pick a little part that was not quite so that way. So so this is Winston O. Abbott, my grandfather, and here's the beginning of the book. Come, let us walk among the distant stars. There are no gates, no fences, and no bars. Out there among the stars we will be free. There are no shadows for the heart to see.
When was that published, Kelsey?
let's see. 1966.
It's got a great
It's
cover.
the 13th printing. Yeah. So they had their own print shop, and he worked with an illustrator and published. Here's all the books.
Oh, they're
It kind
beautiful.
of reminded me of your cohort, except much more white.
All right. Anybody else?
I have a haiku from Sonia Sanchez. It's called Haiku 9. The sprawling sound of my death sits on the wind, a white butterfly.
Which book is that from?
I want to go run and grab it for you. It's a beautiful cover. It's from, hold on one second. It is from, which one is it? It's from Wounded in the House of a Friend.
Can I ask a favor? I know we were going to maybe do this like after everybody had gone, maybe we'd read again, but I would love to hear Kelsey's line again and then your line again. Thanks.
Okay. Do you want the whole? It's more than one line. Is that okay?
Yeah, whatever it was that you read.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's see. Come, let us walk among the distant stars. There are no gates, no fences, and no bars. Out there among the stars we will be free. There are no shadows for the heart to see.
The sprawling sound of my death sits on the wind, a white butterfly.
That's so nice. I feel it start to come together.
There's
Here,
another one in the chat too.
Oh, great.
You want me to read it?
Sure.
Okay, from Diana. Heard melodies are sweet, but those unheard are sweeter. John Keats.
I'm going to read a line from Salt Body Shimmer by Erica Foreman. I spoke into the chamber of myself and took back the derecho of my name. Now I feel like we're definitely building something. Does somebody have the next line?
I have a good one, but I want to open it up. I think one that might go nicely next. This is from Wanda Coleman from the poem Prayer for America Reborn. In the reign of murderers, in the guise of law and order, let the long silenced speak.
I have one. It's kind of out of context, so it's Adrienne Marie Brown quoting Tony Cade Bambara. The role of the artist is to make the revolution irresistible.
This one goes after that. This is from Don't Let Me Be Lonely by Claudia Rankine. In order for something to be handed over, a hand must extend and a hand must receive.
I have another one if you want. Okay. This one is Claudia Castro Luna, who's our poet laureate. In the river of memory, the roots of my tree search for security. Yesterday places, familiar faces, friends of the past. This is a little letterpressed.
Ooh, pretty.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love it.
It makes me think maybe Dion Brand will have something.
Anyone else wants to put one in the chat, I'll read it.
I imagine people running around looking for their books.
I know I have the temptation to go around and grab mine. I might.
I just keep them packed all around my body at all times.
Anne, were you going to read one?
I have so many, I'm happy to. Let's see. I've been really loving Dion Brand's The Blue Clerk. I cannot recommend this book enough. Let's see. I'm trying to remember what you just read. Well, this sort of goes with Rankin. The author must erase this notebook with snow and snows and snows and trains and febrile women.
There's another quote from Emergent Strategy that I think goes well with that. There's a couple here. Which one do I want? I think this one I'll read. Art is not neutral. It either upholds or disrupts the status quo, advancing or regressing justice.
Mm-hmm.
I have another one, but I don't want to hog if anyone else wants to go.
Carrie says that she's been finishing errands, just shut up, running around, scurrying around, looking for lines.
Oh, yay, great.
I'm assuming, yeah. No worries at all.
Kelsey, did you have one?
Yeah, just trying to give some space for other people. Okay, so this one is Hope Amico, who's another letterpress printer. And she does this project called the Keep Writing Postcard Project, where she mails you a postcard and then you divide it and you send it back to her. She collects them and shows them. So this one is, again, these are not one line. And that which was tiny was now immense. Exhibit A, the system cracking out its own ribs, or a cat flat on the tarmac, an eruption of flies, and when you name me, the small skin of which contained me lets you in.
Oh.
Yeah, she's awesome.
I have another Adrienne Marie Brown, and I feel like it's like what you were talking about, Sarah. I mean, I feel like this is what the book is about, so it's iterated throughout the text. What we practice at the small scale sets the patterns for the whole system.
Yeah.
I have another Wanda Coleman that makes me think of the one you read, Kelsey. There's two, and there's a Sonia Sanchez one too, but I'll read this one from Wanda Coleman, and it's from the poem Olio Intaglio. I worried that they would kill my children and then not come for me. One down. Harvesters of hate, what do you gather? Those billions keeping you safe from my fury.
In Growing Up Hip Hop by Khalil Al-Mustafa, he writes in a poem entitled Brotherhood. When approached by mirrors, walking late night streets, I too have clenched the purse strings of my mind.
Yeah.
Elsie says that one was hard. These are giving me feels.
Yeah, the space for that is important.
Mm-hmm. There's one other Sonia Sanchez one I'll share, and it's from a piece called Bullet Holes of Resistance, and it's about her time in Nicaragua and reading poetry to revolutionaries and with revolutionaries. And here's a quote: "I hold out my wounds." Speaks for me to that vulnerability that we talked about.
Something in Brand about that. Will you read it again, Sarah?
Yeah. "I hold out my wounds.
I do not witness the violence of war. I witness the violence of spectacle."
Mm. Hmm. Are there any others that folks want to share?
How about this one? Try to stay grounded.
Yeah. I love that. I imagine you have a stack of prints right there in front of you.
I do.
I love that that is an airplane. Like that you're meant to fly, try to stay grounded. Your nature is to lift off, try to stay grounded.
Look, Kitty dropped off a handful of these for me the other day. I love them. I've been giving them to all of the.
I need one of those.
Okay, I have one. I have one for you. She
That's
dropped
lovely.
a lot. I will drop one off for you.
Oh,
She
that's so good.
I ordered a few because she was donating proceeds to the National Bailout Fund, and I wanted to give them to the young activists in my life, that being my children.
Yeah, I've counted on the one at Community Print.
Yeah.
Now I don't get to see it, so.
Well, now I have an extra one for you.
Oh, you're the best.
Kitty is also distributing them through Olifant. You can go get one.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
That is great. So I love what just happened. But I love what just happened with both the lines talking to each other and the spaces that got left between them.
Mm-hmm.
It's that conversation. It strikes me that not only would it be great to have the lines in the chat, give people a minute to write in the lines that they read, but also the books. What a good reading list.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And in fact, I forgot to mention this earlier, but one of the things that that we wanted to do was give some space at the end of this time together so folks could type in the lines and the author and the work, and then that way we can all go, because I definitely, there's a handful of ones that were read that I want to go check out. So
yeah, for sure.
So we'll leave space for that at the end. Oh, and actually part of why we want to do that also is that we had this vision of a document that would be a takeaway, like an archive of this time we had together, so that you could go back and revisit those lines and the works. And so if you're comfortable, when you leave the lines, or even if you didn't contribute any lines, but at the end, if you put your email in the chat, Nicole's going to compile all of these lines, and then she's going to send everybody the compilation of all the lines in the works from today. So make sure that you type in your lines and or leave your email if you're comfortable with that, so you can get them.
So it turns out actually I have everyone's email, so
Oh, perfect.
just based on who came, like I have, you don't have to put your email in.
The perfect group.
Know who's here, yeah.
I love it.
I was sort of documenting as we went, so I'll have it in order. And then if y'all would type in the lines, that would just let me complete the document. Thank you so
I
much.
numbered mine as I read them so that I would remember.
I want to do one more. I realized that I didn't read anything from Carlos's book. Carlos is one of the authors who we published in 2020. And I have a broadside on the wall behind me. I think Sarah has the same broadside on the wall behind her that we printed at Community Print. And it comes from this page of his book, Carlos Seurat, The High Alive. And this is in the half of the book called The Utterances. And it goes, remember to leave the city. Remember to run if you need to. Remember the dawn and stew and buildings if you want to, and keep record. Remember shape. Remember to forget your shape. Remember the hills wet with dew. Remember the hills wet with blood. Remember the morning.
Thanks for adding that one.
Yeah.
It'd be nice to take a little bit of time to transition and to just like hear. Well, I have two questions. One is if anyone had a particular process and how you chose the lines you chose, like what brought you to that, what did you do? And then also just what resonates. So what's bubbling up for you through this word potluck experiment?
Hello, this is Terry.
Hi, Terry.
Hi.
Hi, Terry.
Hello. You know, I came home and I started to scurry for lines, and as a visual artist, I just wanted to listen to all of you. It was past the point of going and finding something, and you all had just fabulous things that you were giving me. So I went and got my sketchbook and sat down with some pencils and just started writing down some of those words. So that was really great. So that's an interesting way of processing that. And thank you all for that.
I love that.
Yeah.
So in the spirit, the interdisciplinary spirit of the press.
Yeah. Yesterday, I sat down in the sun with a stack of about 20 books. And after I got through the first 3, I was like, oh my gosh, I have 20 lines already. I'm going to stop now or else I'm going to like end up with 100 lines and I'm not going to know where to start. So that's why I just stuck with the top 3 books on my pile. And it felt, there was something that felt really, it was a reminder to me of practice, and that I think about my writing practice, but I'm also remembering the importance of my reading practice. That I think that sometimes I tend to just think, well, I'm just gonna read this young adult sci-fi story at night when I'm in bed before I go to sleep, because that's all I have the emotional, bandwidth for. And also those are great and love them for a lot of reasons. But yesterday sitting out in the sun was also great, the sun, but just reminding myself that I'm surrounded, like I have surrounded myself by a lot of writers who I really respect and I need to sink into more often. So I think that was part of the process that was really important for me, was just being like, oh yeah, this is also part of what I want to be doing during this time, is continuing to read and listen and think about these voices. So.
I've been getting a lot of really amazing mail since this whole thing started. So some of the things that I just grabbed were postcards and pieces of mail that I've gotten over the past few months. And then the reason I had my grandfather's books out is because my daughter asked me randomly to send her some excerpts from them, and I couldn't find them. I had to like go digging to find the books, and then she wanted me to just take pictures of some of the pages. So that's why those were out on my desk.
Do you feel personally connected to them, Kelsey?
I do, because it's my grandfather, but they're, I mean, reading them back at the age I'm at now, some of them really connect with me and some of them don't. He did write a lot about spirituality, and that part is sort of not really my jam, but he also was a naturalist and wrote a lot about nature, and that part I enjoy.
Yeah. It's really, I noticed two things about both looking for lines and, well, yes, I did look for lines this morning when I was preparing for the potluck. But it's also the way I read, which is to sort of douse for things in books sometimes. I don't only read cover to cover. I often will crack open a book and it's almost like a divination without the divinity. I guess, Kelsey, I'm relating to you in that way. And it's really interesting the difference between that process when the book was written by somebody I know and when the book was written by somebody I don't know. And I'm curious about that, why that is, like how relationship enters into our conversations and how necessary is personal connection in order to be relational. And I'm really interested in the qualities of relationality and mutuality and accountability and reciprocity and all of these things that we can bring to our engagements with things that we don't even know. And so I just, even reading the lines from Carlos's book compared to reading the lines and from, like, I know Khalil and I know a couple of the people who I read from. And there's some extension of my imagination that's different with those books than is different with the extension of my imagination in the case of books whose authors I don't know. And I guess I noticed that this morning, and I'm curious about that, so I'll keep thinking about it. This has been lovely, and we have time for people to write their lines or anything that they want to share in the chat. And titles of books that you want to recommend but didn't reference today are also fine. We're in the process of collecting and making recommendations on authors, in particular Black authors right now, especially Black authors published by indie presses. There's a hashtag campaign right now that I'm forgetting the name of, and I have mixed feelings about, but which in spirit I feel supportive of, and the press is going to be doing it sort of the work that we already do with a somewhat greater density of social media posts about Black authors and their work. So please feel free to type those titles in. And also, if you have any questions for me or Sarah, now we have a couple minutes for you, or more comments about.
Yeah, questions, comments.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about how long the third thing has existed?
Go for it, Sarah.
Okay. I think technically it was January of 2020, wait, what was
2019, right?
2019, yeah. Da Nang, sitting around a table of Da Nang, having pho.
Almost for sure wonton soup.
Yeah, that's right. Egg roll or egg noodle, I can't, yeah. Anyway, lots of good food. So it's been about a year and a half. Yeah.
And we started talking about it probably 6 months before that.
Yeah, like July before that.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And then really got moving on it in January.
You've had 2 cohorts, is that right?
We're in our second cohort. We're in our 2021 cohort. We just announced our 2021s, so we're in editorial with them. Yeah, I just had a great meeting yesterday with the Wanawari people about an anthology that they're doing. So this is an interesting cohort in that it's one of the projects headed up by Wanawari with Alicia Johnson and Rachel Kessler is an anthology. So really we're still collecting the whole cohort because there'd be these 10 other artists embedded within the cohort. And so we're starting to get their names, and that's pretty thrilling.
I have a question. I would like to know what is the third thing?
Oh,
How did you guys come up with that name?
That is the question. What is the third thing? Well, the story behind the story, the third thing is the better idea that you come up with when you use imagination instead of compromise. So and it comes from, I think Gray is the person who suggested it as the name for the press. And it comes from a story I once told him about the process of building our house. My partner and I built a little house, and we both wanted to love everything in it absolutely. And so we decided we wouldn't compromise on any decision that we had to make, any of the many, many, many decisions we had to make about the house. And so if one of us wanted one thing and one of us wanted another, we had to come up with a third thing that neither of us had thought of independently and that we both liked better. Yeah.
and that's really been one of our guiding principles all
Yeah.
along.
Almost for sure, if we feel stymied, if we feel bogged down, if we feel whatever with the many things that we have had to figure out how to do with the press, and because we're really trying to do things differently, a lot of subtle things and big things, and almost for sure, if we say what's okay, we actually know at this point what the feeling is that calls for the question. I know the stuck feeling that means like ask, what is the third thing? Look for the third thing.
And I'll say that since I've been actively engaged in looking for the third thing through the work of the press, it has influenced every other part of my life. I find that when I start to feel that, I'm like, okay, well, what's the third thing? It's gotten to a point where my sweetie will say, well, what's the third thing? And I'm like, oh, I don't want to talk about the third thing. So once you start thinking about it, and you start thinking about imagination over compromise, it starts to kind of slide into all the areas I have found.
Yeah, that's what happened with the house. It's like, oh, we could do this with everything. Everything could call for imagination instead of compromise. We could love everything.
Yes.
I have a question about, I mean, this is going to be, you're going to have to simplify drastically, but how you choose your authors. Do you research and reach out to them? Did you solicit people to come to you? Was it more people that you already knew for the first cohort, and has that changed for the second cohort? Mm-hmm. Kind of going back to the concept of how sometimes when we know people, it's I don't know, you can, it's easier to connect with their words sometimes if you know them.
Mm-hmm. Yes to the last scenario. For the first cohort, it was all people that we knew in various, and who had book projects, and who we knew had book projects or had work. And in the case of Carlos and Marilyn, there were they had work that we were interested in seeing them adapt to this or develop into a book form. Jennifer's manuscript, Jennifer Calkins with Fugitive Assemblage, her manuscript was nearly just like, it arrived almost how it went out into the world, plus book design. And then Megan had, I think what turned out to be the critical framework for the book that she wrote, and the voice, and she developed a collection of essays that she had been working on into an almost entirely different collection of essays. And then in 2021, still yes to your question, it's now expanded. We, every year we will invite the cohort members to recommend cohort members. And so we got about 5 recommendations from each of our cohort members, and we followed them around. And in some cases we went looking, whether we encountered people in our other travels and thought, oh, that's a person. I haven't, this is happening for the anthology, but other than this, I haven't Is that true? I was gonna say I haven't read a book and said, oh, I want to publish that person's book. I think it's more like we hear a voice, and then we want to hear what else that voice has to say, what else that person has to say, and if they feel like saying it. Does that match with your experience, Sarah, of the 2021 and how
Yeah,
we sort of
so.
approach things?
I think so, and I think that that a lot of our choosing who we want to publish has a lot to do with what it feel, going back to that feeling. You know, there's a lot of trusting in that person's voice, and I think for you also that feeling of how you'll work with them.
Yeah, and we do this sort of asking the cohort to recommend people in part and also reaching out to different organizations to recommend people like Kundaman, Kaveh Khanum, various organizations that support the culture of arts, especially among people of color, to in some way to make us aware of things that we might be blind to, both because of our regional isolation, because of whiteness. We want to expand the sphere via people of color, not like what people of color already have access to us, these white people. So it's sort of like expand in this way so that we're ever farther from our center, so that we are decentered further and further. And the cohort has its own sort of organic, the cohorts have their own form and this web structure. I feel like we could, that's a whole big conversation, and we're getting close to the end, close to an hour anyway, which feels like an end of sorts.
Yeah.
Are you going to use community print again for the 2021 cohort?
Can we come back?
Are we allowed? Are we welcome?
At some point.
Yes, absolutely. As soon as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I bookmark.
I miss having ink on my hands and the smell of paper. Mm-hmm.
Community print has been absolutely essential to who we are.
Talk about a necessary alternative. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it feels like it's part of the third thing DNA.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Alternative isn't understood.
Right. Any other? It's been so lovely. Thank y'all all for showing up and participating in this word potluck experiment. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's been really lovely spending an hour of the day with you.
Mm-hmm. And seeing everyone's faces. Because it's been so long since I've seen folks. Mm-hmm.
Thank you both so much. This was amazing. It was great to learn more and get to participate in your experiment.
Yeah.
Any last comments for Anne or Sarah? All right. Well, thank you both so much. I will email you all once I get the rest of the quotes. I think just from Sarah and Anne, I'll email everyone the document, and then I'll also put it into the video somehow. So, yeah.
Would you prefer that? Oh, go ahead, Anne, sorry.
I was just saying thank you, Nicole, for being such a lovely host.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for holding this space. It's been great.
You both, Terry says thank you in the comments. All right.
Thanks, Terry.
Thanks, y'all.
Bye. See you soon.
Bye.